Hello, Eric Brown. How are you doing this morning?
Excellent.
Well, we're gonna do a little deep dive into the background of Phoenix culture today. I want to tell people what it is, why do we call this thing we do Phoenix culture? What is the actual meaning of that? And I want to hear, you've told me a little bit about it before, but I want to hear your backstory of Phoenix culture. Like what is the origin story of Phoenix culture? How did this come to life through you?
Maybe both more and less exciting than people imagine. The original seed for Phoenix culture was planted on a 3-week plant diet I did in the jungles of Peru. It was the first time I'd ever been alone in silence for that amount of time. And I mean, during the time that I went down to do that, a lot of my interest, a lot of my attention, a lot of my work was focusing on um, you could say the roots of culture, complex systems, new models of governance. I was really into liquid democracy. I was really into DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, as they were coming up. I was reading a bunch. A really good example is a book called The Collapse of Complex Systems and Complex Civilizations. It's a really eye-opening, it's a really eye-opening read. But so I had all of these inputs coming in, and the space in the jungle, no electricity, no plumbing, no interaction. Actually, it was just me and myself for 3 weeks straight. It really gave me the space. It really gave me the time to think, time to reflect, and the time to actually meet the jungle, meet nature on its own pace. And that was where the idea of Phoenix culture was synthesized. That if we want to play the game of humanity, of civilization, of society for a long enough timescale, we really need to learn from the wisdom of nature, the cycles of the jungle. Nothing is wasted, everything is renewed, everything takes what it needs. There's a lot of harmony to find amidst the kind of chaos of the jungle. So I had the original seed kind of in my head for that, but the structure, the content that became the founding of Phoenix culture was actually done back in the downtown jungle, the concrete jungle of Toronto, Canada. So when I'd come back from that experience, essentially the way I integrated it was I would lock myself in my room each evening and honestly just write hours and hours and hours, write about the stuff that I thought, the insights that I had, what I was actually thinking and feeling with that experience. And that became it ended up becoming something like a 20-page kind of white paper essay on where we need to go, who we need to become to get there, and why all of this is so important. And then from those years on, it's really just been a process of grounding that vision, of grounding the feeling, of putting things out into the world where people can actually come and participate, come play with us, come build with us, come grow with us. But that might be the origin story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that it when you talk about it to me, the way I hear it is like it's this massive, it's a very large scale vision, and we'll talk about the specifics of it in a minute of what exactly this vision is that you've had for it and that you've written voraciously about. But what I find so interesting is it is a massive, massive vision, a very radical vision for in a lot of ways for what life can be, what humanity can be, how, as you said, we can take these principles from the jungle and nature's way of harmony and all of these things that sometimes sound cliche, but on this massive, massive scale. And as you said, the challenge now is just to try to bring it into reality. We talk about it a lot, and when you speak about it, like it lives in your head very clearly, which I'm excited for you to explain. And And the challenge, and also the beautiful as well as the frustrating part is, as you just said, grounding it in reality, right? Okay, so where do you start? How do you start from zero? How do you, plot the course to doing this thing? And it starts with one person, right? Which I think we all know in some sense. We want to just go out and make it happen, and it starts with us. It starts inside, and then we try to expand it on a bigger level. But yeah, I think it's interesting from my point of view to be involved at this point of okay, how do we take this huge thing, this huge vision, and actually like plant the seed in reality, which is what we've been doing, what we've been working on, and actually see it grow. It takes a lot of patience too. So anyway, with that said, I feel like I'm talking about something we haven't really spelt out yet. Tell us a little bit about the vision of Phoenix Culture. What do you envision? What is this, maybe this, I call it vision. I don't know if that's the word you would use or not, but this vision or inspiration or idea that, that basically came to you a few years ago and that you've been working towards.
There's a really simple place to start with the vision that I think people either don't want to take a first look at or are willing to admit to themselves. The foundation, like over and above anything else, the vision for Phoenix Culture is creating or stewarding a kind of civilizational structure that doesn't blow itself up. It's not overly conspiratorial to take a real look at the individual events that are unfolding, the trajectory of where these trends could go, and the magnitude of the impact that they could have. There are a whole lot of things that, I mean, in other places I've spoken about them, I think there are a lot of great people doing extremely good work in things like the existential risk space, in the ethics and moral foundations of culture and civilization. It is easy and actually tempting. It is emotionally tempting to just shove that under the rug. But there we have the potential, as always, humanity has always had the potential, and now we have the power to do both extremely great things and extremely devastating things. So Phoenix Culture was, at least, if nothing else, born from a vision of what would it take and who would we have to be to get to the point where we can actually perpetuate and hopefully actually grow the beauty and the power and the potential of humanity, of civilization, and of culture. But that in and of itself is certainly the starting point. Should that go well, I mean, I would hope that there is a much more beautiful world that is possible. And insofar as Phoenix Culture can play a part in that, I would love to do that. I would love for us to recapture the spirit of greatness, the spirit of sacredness, the spirit of harmony that has been captured and tasted and expressed by at least some cultures throughout human history. I think there are very beautiful foundations of indigenous cultures that we have a lot to learn from and integrate. There are also extremely good virtues and values to be found in the kind of founding ethos of Western culture and the great architecture and the great men and women, the great people that were actually made there as well. And so finding this, you could say it's both finding and inventing or integrating the kind of beauty of both of these, the greatness of the human spirit, but also the natural wisdom of living in harmony with nature, of actually respecting your fellow men and women, of not allowing communities to erode, families to isolate, people to become more and more challenged, depressed, obscure. That would be the hope, that this ethos of continual reinvention, of harmony with yourself, of harmony with the planet, actually grows into an expression of the greatest parts of ourselves. And yes, I think you're absolutely correct that it can only ever begin at the level of the individual. It has to begin at the level of the individual. But fortunately, this is also part of the cycle, is that the people become the culture. There is no culture separate from the people who comprise it, and the culture, for better and for worse, influences the individual. And so you have this really like back and forth feedback process of who the people become themselves and the culture that they contribute to, and kind of doing the dance of finding the best in yourself and the best in your contribution and your community and your culture is the um, tightrope that we kind of dance on here at Phoenix Culture.
That all sounds nice and well. How do you go about actually making that happen?
One step at a time. One step at a time, hopefully. I think there are a few things that have at least stood out to us and to me as being both foundationally important and also accessible enough that you can actually do the work on them. This might be the first starting point, and it's one of those things that is almost so obvious that it goes completely unspoken, but it's something like rekindling the spirit inside of the individual. Just that starting point, that seed, stoking the flame of actually you can do great things. Actually, you have the power and the agency to make real contribution to yourself, your community, to this planet, to history. That spirit has been ooh, that spirit has been lost in some people. That spirit has been lost in some cultures. That spirit has been kind of shoved aside, pushed away, people made to feel like they're too much, they're too big, their dreams aren't possible, that everything's just on a downward spiral. So actually the first starting point is you have to have the willingness to do it. You have to have the belief, you have to have the desire, the authentic expression to move towards something brighter, better, more beautiful. And so part of what we do, whether it's through Radical Redesign, through the 100 Days, through what is yet to come, is actually rekindle the vital spark in people. It sounds really ambiguous, but you know it when you feel it. I think the second thing that we focus on a lot, and I think is really important to the both of us, is cultivating you could call them the foundational virtues in people. These were the kind of interpersonal bridges, right, that actually make something like a tight-knit community possible, something that allows civilization to thrive and function at all, right? Integrity, honesty, discipline, consistency, beauty, communication. These things sound so basic, but they are all but lost in modern culture. We've become so isolated, we've become so jaded, we've become so confused, so overwhelmed. And it's actually maybe a quick tangent on this. I think a lot of people feel, I know a lot of people, I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people on things like this. A lot of people, including myself, feel sometimes like gaslit by being relentlessly kind of beaten over the head with this narrative of progress. Yes, there are absolutely a ton of ways that humanity has improved over the arc of history. You can't deny that. You'd be extremely foolish to do otherwise. But it misses the fact, and actually sometimes tells you that it's not even real, that fundamental things have been lost. Things like the integrity of the family unit, the connection to a community that actually cares about you, visions of the future that are inspiring instead of kind of dystopian, totalitarian 1984-esque narratives. Like these things have, if not been entirely lost, are being like actively eroded. And so while there has been immense progress, there are also things over the last several hundred years that have been foundationally lost and need to be rebuilt. And so our goal here is actually rebuilding those cultural foundations, right? Art of meaning, connections that matter, a life of purpose and vision, All of those things you can actually do on a day by day basis. Those are the steps you can take. And if you get enough people, if you get a wave or a phenomenon of that to actually spread, you can imagine a generation or two from now, or seven from now, 7 generations from now, when people have truly reclaimed that vital spirit, a life of virtue and value, that the things that are built from that, the stability that that provides because you're supported in this life, is the aim. It's the goal, it's the hope.
So how does that tie into the name Phoenix culture? How is this idea of the Phoenix related to what you just said?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part first because it came through the culture first. A lot of people, for well-intentioned reasons, put all of the eggs in the basket of technological progress just to pull humanity out of anything. Technology has made things considerably better for humanity over time. Absolutely undeniable. But really, the arc of human flourishing, the arc of humanity's progress is rooted in the culture. Culture is the thing that actually influences and allows for what technology gets made, what things are permissible in society, what is appropriate, what is desirable. All of this is influenced by the culture itself. And so it was really, I think part of the original seed was, if we want to both solve the challenges we're up against and simply just create something more beautiful, more powerful, more possible, it has to begin with the culture. I think the phoenix is a really interesting kind of mythological symbol for two reasons. One, fairly obvious, and one less obvious. More obvious is the symbolism that the phoenix is often presented as um, this great symbol of rebirth, of regeneration, of renewal. For me, this hits on every scale, particularly the individual. If you actually want to reinvent yourself, to become someone greater, to become someone new, it comes at the expense of who you are. Who you are and who you are becoming are always in this kind of dynamic tension. And if you really want to change your own fundamental characteristics, that is fundamentally changing who you are. On the societal, civilizational, cultural level, to me, the myth of the phoenix was that it was a symbol of harmony. It was actually to me, it was a living representation of the nature and the jungle that I was surrounded by when the original seed was planted. Nothing was wasted. Everything was alive. Everything renews itself, is part of this unyielding, unbroken system, continually transforming, continually reinventing itself moment to moment. And so to me, the symbol of the phoenix was actually just oddly enough, the most accurate representation of the process of change. And I think the second part that I actually love, maybe even more, but is almost never spoken about in the symbol of the phoenix, is that it only renews itself in some myths once every like 500 years. Yes, the phoenix transformation is an unbelievably beautiful symbol, but what does it do for the rest of the 500 years? The rest of the 500 years, it is this great symbol of beauty, of power, of grace, of poise, of possibility. And that is something I also want. I would hope that people within Phoenix culture, that people who are impacted by this actually feel that you have permission to be beautiful, to be powerful, to be graceful, to do the things that you desire. And the phoenix symbol actually balances both of those really well. When who you are is no longer serving you, there's the potential for great transformation. But the rest of the time, you're absolutely free and empowered in your own expression, in your own contribution, in your own living mythology in many ways. Yeah, I mean, does it mean anything different to you? Or how has that shown up for you?
I like what you said about how, you know, right, the phoenix represents, to put it in simple terms, this cycle of regeneration, of life, death, and then more life, and it keeps going and it keeps going. And so what's symbolic about to me is, as you said, you know, you can look at this of kind of these long, you know, centuries long cycles of regeneration, which the history of humanity goes through anyway, right? We have, you know, the Dark Ages, then we have a Renaissance, and then we have this and that, and like, you know, we just can't help. We almost can't help but go through cycles. And what what has made so much sense to me is this idea of cycles and regeneration applies on a grand level as far as centuries and culture, as well as on a very small individual level, right? Where, you know, and I think part of what brings the grand, broad scope down to the personal is just this, is like, you know, Phoenix culture is all about creating a culture that itself is regenerative on a large scale. But the only way to accomplish that is to practice it on a small scale. And what does it look like to live like the way of the Phoenix for one individual person? Well, it looks like coming to terms with and embodying that living, dying, living cycle. And that has been extremely meaningful to me in my own life and watching others go through it. I mean, that's literally what happens to people when they spend 100 days in a heroic initiation, and they can't help it. Like, if you do that, you can't help but be completely burned down, burn everything old down, be reduced to ashes, and then come alive as a whole new version of yourself after that. That is the most beautiful thing about the Phoenix symbology to me, is seeing it in individuals, seeing it in myself, seeing it in you. You know, I mean, we've both gone through our own, if I can call it, like Phoenix rebirths, if you will, through our own lives of burning everything down that we used to believe or be or think or do, and then completely switching into a whole new way of being. And that is what I love about it, is the more we begin to do that as individuals, the more we're able to do it on a larger scale. And as you said, build an actual culture of healthy regeneration. And really, really getting used to these cycles of like, death is okay, basically. Letting the old things die, letting old ways die, letting things that don't help you anymore die out. That's okay. And then you do that, and then what comes after is more life. I really like it. I latched onto this idea when we read Women Who Run with the Wolves last year, because the author calls it the life, death, life cycle. And it's so simple, but it's this little like reminder of, oh yeah, more life comes after death. And it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. So yeah, as we embody that ourselves, as we encourage others who are part of Phoenix culture to embody that, that's where it becomes a movement. That's where it becomes a culture. Is all of these individuals going through these cycles, evolving themselves, allowing themselves to not just, what's the difference? Like, to not just grow vertically, because that's damn near impossible anyway, but to allow themselves to go through these cycles of burning it all down, coming it back to life, burning it all down, coming it back greater and greater and bigger and brighter every time. And so I guess the way it lives in my head is this I'm a very visual person. So this visual of like all these Phoenix individuals going through these cycles, and then together, right, the individuals create this huge movement, and they create this momentum where we're able to evolve into this beauty of both harmony and progress and greatness. That's the beauty of it for me, is it's not just, you know, when we think of regeneration or a cycle, it can turn into a loop visual. And it's not just a loop. It's not just, oh yeah, okay, you know, life just goes on forever, right? Every single year, a tree has its green leaves, then they turn brown, then they fall, then they die, and then it repeats over and over. Like, no, that's not that's not that's not what regeneration is, right? It's, you do the things, and growth comes from it, and more beauty and more harmony and more greatness comes from it. And yeah, I just have all these beautiful visuals in my head of what that looks like. But that's what I think we've already proven, even in our short time of creating Phoenix culture in reality, of doing these really beautiful cohorts with people and seeing how, yes, hundreds of people can actually embody this and go through this and feel that momentum, right? When 100 people are doing it together, that's momentum. Like, that's a movement, that's making change. But only because we're each doing it on an individual level every single day. So that's what the Phoenix symbology means to me, if that makes sense. Yeah. Combining the harmonious living with greatness as well, as you said.
Yeah, that was awesome. I want to build on that because this is one of the things when we talk about Phoenix culture and I introduce people to it or they come to an experience, it is really common. Some people mean this positively, some people mean it as a critique. To say that, yeah, the vision is so grand, it's just so big, and I don't know how anyone can do that. To me, given everything you said, like, I relate to it almost from the exact opposite direction, which is like, there is nothing more natural to you than this. It's actually, all we're actually doing is getting on board with a process that you are part of and have been a part of for millions and millions of years. You are a part of the ancestry of humanity, right? You are doing a thing that has reinvented itself so many times you can't even count. You are fundamentally connected to the process of life. And there's a lot of spiritual people who get on board with that idea and actually relate to it. I think this is where I diverge a little bit when they say, "Oh yeah, we're all part of life. Everything is so peaceful and so blissful." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's true. You're also a part of the thing that made volcanoes and earthquakes. Like, the amount of power that life has is unbelievable. And literally, as a result, the amount of power that is actually available to you, the amount that you can do and become and put out into the world and contribute is astronomically larger than people allow themselves to think." So, like, maybe another final example on this is like, when you're in a relationship with another person, you develop all your own kind of inside jokes and daily routines and ways you go about your life. Like, that is literally a culture of two. When you go to summer
Yeah,
camp, you go
fair.
to summer camp as a kid, and like, summer camp has a culture. It has things you can do and things you can't do, and ways you should speak and ways you shouldn't speak, and a group of people around a shared cause. Like, summer camp has a culture, right? It's really easy to get lost in. But equally, right, you also do have something like Western culture, which spans back an unbelievable amount of time and encompasses an unbelievable amount of people. But it is also just simply a group of people united around a shared set of whatever values, goals, desires, hopes, dreams, language, places, traditions. So yeah, like, when certainly at this stage in the game, when I talk about grounding Phoenix culture, it's a group of people coming together to collectively agree to play a game a certain way with certain goals, with certain aims, and all who wish to get on board with that and actually to discover, right? Part of this is an open investigation. It's an open discovery process of how can people thrive together? What ways have we learned can we integrate from the past, and what new ways remain to be discovered? It's easy to immediately jump out when you hear this and just say, yeah, we're just going to, take over the world. Like, that is not the goal. Diversity is also an unbelievably important lesson from nature. The only thing that survives in a resilient capacity is diversity in nature. But yeah, Culture is actually a very intimate experience too. It's a culture with your family, a culture with your community, a culture with your country. Um, yeah, and I think that sometimes gets glossed over, or like missed or misinterpreted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you said, a relationship might be a culture of two. I mean, arguably you are a culture of one. Like I have my own little weird way of being, and that's the culture of Chloe. Like that's just it.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an adverse reaction to the word cult, which obviously is a part and comes from the same root as culture. Arguably that's not a bad thing. It only has an adverse, what's what I'm looking for, connotation, because there have been some really nasty cults out there, right? But the idea of cult or tribe or group or coming together to, again, just do a collective thing is what makes us human. That's what separates us from just about any other species, is that we have this when we create this. Yeah, culture doesn't come about because someone sits down and decides to create it. They're like, this is how people are going to do it. Like it comes because you start doing something, or you're doing something, a way of life, and other people want to do that too. And they see your example and they do it, and they're like, yeah, this is a good way of doing stuff. Let's do this. And then suddenly you have a bunch of people doing the same things together. Like, boom, that's it. The way you describe it, it's like and this is kind of holding both sides of it, is it feels so grand and so like change the world. And it's also so simple. And it's not a cop out. Like I think myself included, sometimes we have this reaction. It's like, oh, you just start with yourself and work on yourself and that'll change the world. And people are like, nah, like that's too small. Like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not really doing anything if all I'm doing is working on myself. Like, bullshit, that is the work. Like, that is what makes it count. Because the more people who start doing that, who start reclaiming their values, who start believing in themselves again, that yes, they can do something better than just settle into mediocrity and middle age, that is where the change happens. Because the more people who do that, the more other people are like, okay, I could do that too. And it just catches on quite naturally. Yeah, it's not a cop out just to say, well, work on yourself. That is the only way. There's something else you said earlier I was thinking about, which is how it's almost, and not almost, it is inevitable to live in this way we're describing. It is inevitable to live the way of the phoenix. It's inevitable to live in a regenerative cycle. Like, it is the way of nature. It is the way of things. We will all live and die. Like, we cannot escape this cycle. We can't escape this way of life. We can pretend to escape it in our minds, or to ignore it, or to believe other things, but we literally can't escape it. And so arguably all that we are advocating for is go deeper into your own reality of life, which is you live and die, you go through seasons, you go through cycles, you change, and you harness that process to evolve and to help other people evolve. Like, when you think about it that way, how inevitable it is not doing it, like not living in this way, it seems insane. It seems insane because you're just pretending that another reality is so when it is not. Yeah, I think I'm really big on this, and I use the word cycles a lot because, as you know, I've been super into, what am I going to say? Super into cyclical living for women, or for, for menstruation cycles, like monthly cycles. Like, that is so real and so powerful, and ignoring it, which I've done for most of my life because that's what I was taught, is insane. It's insane to ignore this natural cycle that is built into your body. It's insane to ignore the natural cycles of the seasons, of the years, of whatever your own individual person is going through, right? It's actually insanity to ignore these principles that are so deeply encrusted in nature. And so, we talk about Phoenix culture being kind of radical a lot because, in a way, it is a radical shift from what now has become modern day Western consumerist capitalist culture. Like, sure, it's radical in that way, but in the grand scheme of things, like in the reality of the earth that is, it is actually incredibly normal and natural. We've just been so far removed from it that it feels radical to be like, yeah, I'm going to exit the matrix and live in the jungle. It's like, that's not that crazy. Like, that's actually pretty pretty natural. It's felt pretty natural. Um, yeah, I guess I'll stop there, but that's been that's been something I've thought about a lot.
I love this. Yeah, there's a kind of summary line of a Buddhist story that I really like, and it just
Mm.
says "let go or be dragged," which is like it's like you
Yeah,
can I you have a choice here. You know, the arc of time, the pace of life, the flow of nature is going to continue, whatever your opinion on that matter is or not. You can either fight it and have a bad time and get dragged along anyways,
yeah,
or you can actually get on board, align yourself with it, and actually have a really, really good time. I'm really excited because, I mean, for whatever reason, it feels like this is still just emerging, but there's a lot of
yeah,
really good science or really good studies and a lot of really good people more and more online demonstrating, literally demonstrating how you can resolve the majority of health concerns by getting back into natural rhythm, particularly your circadian cycle, like getting in the
yeah,
sun, waking up with the sun, going to bed after the sun, not messing with artificial light all the time, right? Your example of women really aligning themselves around their cycle and how hormones change both throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, like just getting back in line with natural flow actually resolves an unbelievable amount of stuff. And again,
yeah.
you brought something up amazingly there, which is like, yeah, when I talk about this, the only thing I'm trying to do at the end of the day is make normal people. It's just that I have a vastly, I would actually, I would actually like to, I would say I would like to like toot my own horn here and just say, I have a vastly more positive and empowered view of what a average human can do than most people admit. Like
Mm,
again, you are born of the
mm,
same force that creates volcanoes and lightning and typhoons. Like that raw energy is a part of you. Humanity is capable of unbelievable stuff. And that's why we love mythology. That's why we love great expedition stories. That's why the hero's journey exists. Like it is just a demonstration of something that is so unbelievably natural to you. It is like sewn into your DNA. Like you have inherited the wisdom of humanity for longer than recorded history. And this stuff just lives naturally inside of you. So, I'm not, at some point, it does kind of reduce to a semantic, like, language game where it's like, I am
yeah,
on one hand, I would hope that we are attempting to make truly great people, truly fantastic people. But at the same time, I also consider that archetype of person the average human being. All people have this inheritance as part of their birthright. And so we're actually just trying to make natural humans once again. And yeah, the more radical part of this is that I would argue, I think the veil is starting to lift in many ways, is that actually the common cultural narratives are the insane interpretations of things. It is
mm,
insane to believe that you can have infinite economic growth on a finite planet. It's insane to believe that you can continue a materials production economy that just creates waste that cannot be reintegrated, right? Like those things if you like really slow down and just say them like one step at a time, it
Yeah.
crumbles. It's incoherent. It's literally insane. And of course, you get
Yeah.
things like, I don't know, you get perversions of power, you get misaligned incentives. Um, I don't, I'm happy too, but I don't really want to spend this like going into just example after example after example of like how bananas things have become in modern culture. It's like, it's embarrassing to say that like, yeah, advocating for like strong, sovereign, capable people in communities that care about each other with ethical leaders is somehow radical. But we've, that is where we
Yeah.
find ourselves today. So if what we're trying to do is radical, like absolutely, I'm all for it, and I think it is. But it's difficult to. I see these things as just normal, as natural, right? The natural expression of the human is to be strong, capable, connected, heart led, willing to lead, willing to contribute, right? And then the natural way of living in harmony with nature is cyclical, it's regenerative, it's closed loop. And so we're just advocating to build that, like, we're just calling in the people who are like, who see that this is both normal, natural, and good and beautiful, and who just want to get on board and play that game at a radically better level than they've been playing before.
Yeah. Woo. The one liner that came to my head as you were describing that is like normalize greatness again. Like
Yeah.
healthy greatness, right? Because yeah, as you were alluding to, like the standard has become super low, and there's nothing wrong with having a simple life, if you will. Like we are both fairly simple people in our day-to-day life. You get up, you do your work, you study, make food. Like we're fairly simple people, but yeah, these are just things that can be normalized in a great way. um what was my other thought on greatness? Yeah, I want to double click on what you were saying about how greatness unchecked or growth unchecked like just does not work. That's a huge problem with the tilt, the masculine growth cultural tilt that we're in right now is just like go go go, progress progress progress, growth 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 unchecked. And because of that, so there's a few things, this is branching out in my head, but because of that, we now kind of, it goes two ways. Either it goes unchecked, right, and we have just unchecked consumerism, unchecked, factories creating gobs and gobs and gobs of stuff that just piles up on our planet. On the other negative branch of that, we only see, that's kind of a powerful word. We don't only see, but we mostly see very negative examples of greatness that's achieved through unscrupulous means, greatness that's achieved through manipulation, corruption, power trips, ego, greed. It's not greatness founded on values, honor, or in service of the people, the greater good, right? We see, and so we often have a negative view of greatness where now we almost glorify the small and we glorify the simple. I think this is what I was talking about earlier. We glorify the small and the simple, and like, oh, the simple life, oh, the small, this is all I want. I just want my home, my house, my whatever, and I'm good. Because to be great is to be greedy and selfish and prideful and all of these things. And yes, but right, how do we balance those? And so again, this is what excites me about Phoenix culture, is that both have to exist, right? On the one hand, we have this natural, cyclical, regenerative way of things, which is very feminine as well. And then we have the need for growth and greatness and evolution and what more can we do? And these are not working against each other, they work with each other so that each can check and balance the other, right? We don't want just a closed loop where we're not really, I don't know, progressing as humans. We're not reaching, you know, whatever you want to call it, our enlightenment, our connection with God, our connection with source, with everything that it is. We don't want to just stay in a loop. That, according to yoga philosophy, is just being stuck in the wheel of samskara, just going in circles. That's not really great. But unchecked growth, which always has a cost, as you said, we live in a finite world, is also not okay, because it does harm, it does damage, it comes at the cost of oppression, of taking away rights and privileges of other groups of people and beings in life. And so we have both, where one is not complete without the other. The cycles and the regeneration serves no purpose if it's not in purpose of something greater. And greatness serves no purpose if it's just self-fulfilling, greatness for greatness' sake. What's the point? Like, okay, and like, good job. It just feeds the ego. So, long-winded way of saying, I think our biggest value is the coming together of the Phoenix way of life in service of the greater good, in service of helping humanity, of helping us all be and attain the best that we can, the most that we can, right? The holistic evolution, not just the evolution of the machine, right? And of the grinds and of the go. Something like that. Yeah. Was that coherent?
Yeah, this is really cool because it just framed the greatness thing for me in a way I hadn't considered before.
Dope.
It actually made so okay, let's take this one step at a time. First, you're
Yeah.
totally correct, and this is exactly my example of like how sad is it that we can't even collectively generate myths and examples of great humans anymore. Right? Like they
Hmm.
can't even muster this up in videos or media. You see like no, not no, but you see very few examples of people that like
Millet.
that you can like get behind in the world. Like, you could actually be like, I would follow this man to the through the freaking Himalayas like Alexander the Great. Like there are very few examples of that, and that is because culture A does not build those people and allows, you've heard me rant about this a lot, allows a parasitic class to dominate. But here's the so yes, so now we get into like today's day and age where you look up at what you would call the cultural elites and the aristocratic classes of society, and you say these people are repulsive. I don't want to be like them. They seem to have power and influence and status. So why would I want any of those if I'm just going to become as
Yeah.
equally repulsive and corrupt and
Right.
whatever as
Right.
them? And so people take themselves out of the greatness game. I can kind of get it. It's
Right.
like,
It's like
look,
backlash. It's like the
yeah,
backlash. It's like, I don't want that. Therefore, that's the only or the main impression of greatness that I have. Therefore, greatness, not cool. Like, no,
but
not good.
here's where it really clicked is like I completely agree that most
Yeah.
functional systems have this like ingrained sense of checks and balances. When things get out of whack in one direction, some opposing force kind of pushes it back, nudges it, and the thing rolls on as usual. But here's the thing. Are you capable, and I mean the general you and anyone listening, even both you and I, right? Is like, okay, these people have the not even just people, right? These institutions, systems, momentums, cultural beliefs, they do currently have an unbelievable amount of momentum, power, influence, status, media access, resources, whatever you want. And it's like, how are you going to check that? How do you check that? Do you have the vitality? Do you have the actual strength? Do you have the actual, like, do you have the resources you need to effectively check that thing? And so actually, it's like, if you want to check, if you want to keep things in check, that is to me the strongest argument why you need to radically pursue your own greatness, your own spirit, your own vitality, so that when, I mean, it's a kind of silly example, but I think it illustrates the point, is like the only way you would be able to check someone who is trying to be violent against your family is to be capable of equal and opposing violence. Like at the end of the day, what are you going to do? Like you can't check them. You just get out of the way and kind of hope things go well. Like it's actually the people who are most cautious of developing power that are the best suited to develop power, because they already have the self-reflexive self-awareness to check themselves in case things like power and influence become corrosive, right? Like you are actually the person who should be doing that, because it's the person who pursues power at all costs with no self-awareness that is capable of truly gnarly things. But it's like your concern of what people with power do is actually the reason you should be becoming as powerful as possible, so that you can take responsibility upon yourself to provide checks and balances. And that can be civilized, right? That can be debate and argumentation and movement making, right? It's not explicitly violent, but it's all relevant.
Yeah.
It's like, actually, that is why you should cultivate power and strength and greatness, so that when equal and opposing force is there, you can actually check things. You have the courage to say, disagree with this. I will not let you pass. This is inappropriate. Like it takes an absurd amount of personal integrity, ethical strength, and raw courage to actually be a dissenting voice and be like, actually, I don't agree with that. Actually, this is inappropriate. Actually, you can't have my family like this. Like those, and that is what, you know, slowly but surely, I hope that we actually develop in people, is the moral character needed, period.
Yeah. I mean, oh, where do I want to go from here? I have like five different branches I could go off on, but I want to bring it kind of back around to the grounding, what we actually do within Phoenix culture. And so I want to maybe go back into this idea of checks, of checking, of balancing, right? Because again, I use kind of the example of regeneration and cycles checking just sheer power, greatness, and growth for its own sake, right? How they are in service of each other. This idea that, again, you're giving examples of these checks and balances, it's in service of each other. How do I want to say this? It's not to cut the other one down, which is what we basically see in politics. It's, well, we're checking and balancing, but we're actually just capping you at the knees. Like we're actually not helping anyone grow. And so it just becomes this cut down, cut down, cut down, cut down. And we're not actually building anything, because the checks and balances have become I'm going to cut you down to where I am. Oh, well, you cut me down. I'm going to cut you down. Like, no, that is not checking. That is not helpful. That's the opposite, right? The helpful checking, and again, you use kind of the example of violence, which is only one example, but I would argue that's actually not a good check, meeting violence with violence, because now we're both just cutting each other off at the knees or the head or wherever we're cutting each other off, right? A better check and balance is, and again, this is extreme. I'm not using this for the specific like violent example, but the better check and balance is like, hey, I see, hey, what are you trying to do and how can I help you? I see you're doing this. This isn't helping you. I need to check you there, right? Because we serve the same thing. How do you do that? You have to remember that we're in service of the same thing, right? In theory, the American government is in service of the American people, population, and territory. It doesn't feel that way most of the time, because it's all just a game of checking and cutting and so many other things that we're not going to get into. But so yeah, maybe I don't have a complete answer for this. Maybe you do, but there's something to checks and balances that can also be detrimental if it's done in this wrong way, where basically, I guess, if you forget that, we're all working for the same cause here. We're all on the same team. We're team Earth. We're team human. We're team evolution. We're team have a good life. We're team values, the shared values that we have. And remembering what we have in common is what enables us to do a healthy check and balance, right? A healthy, hey, I have this, you have that. I see this here that needs to be checked. It's consensual for one, right? It's agreed. Like we're checking each other because we're both working towards the same thing. And yeah, the problem with that is too frequently it becomes a cutting down instead of a checking for growth, if you will. That's the big issue, I think, where I hear a lot of different opposing opinions on, like, cycles and harmony and just be one with nature and it's good and that's all we're doing, versus like grow forever, like the growth bros. And it's like, you're both right. It's not one or the other. You don't have to choose. It's a yes and, not a no but. And the more we find this way through the way of the phoenix, because it's such a good symbol of fusing these and using them to check each other, like that's how we're going to continue growing without having so many costs to it, right? Or again, cause suffering through growth, right? A really simple analogy I have of this in my head. I'm ready for the AI that can take the visuals in my brain and just like show them magically. Like that's what I need, because there's so many visuals that I cannot just artistically express. The very simple analogy I love for this is like a lattice work where vines can grow, or some sort of structure where vines can grow, because without that nice little lattice work, vines will grow, but they're just going to grow horizontally and go over here and go over there and whatever. Or if they're like tomatoes or beans or something, they're not going to be able to produce fruit because they need that space. The lattice work provides that structure for growth so that the other part can just flourish in its own way. And so that very simple visual is what I always have in my head when I think about bringing these two principles together. Right? It's like, I don't want just a lattice because that's ugly. And I don't want tomato vines sprawled out that can't bear fruit because they need the vertical space. I don't know if that's true for tomatoes, but it feels true. I want both. I don't want just one or the other. Yeah. So is that coherent?
Yeah, there are two things. I'll start with the build on, because the second one's a little sensitive. Yeah, and I mean that's largely what I hope that we do. We create a structural scaffold for people to do really difficult work that lets their natural expression come back out of them. One of the checks and balances you can make on yourself is accountability and integrity. You have a standard and you check yourself against it each time, right? And actually updating your own models and understanding based on how that goes, because you've entered into an existing structure. You've entered into an agreement. You've entered into an agreement fundamentally with yourself and with the community. The other thing of checks and balances that is big for us is it's by definition very difficult to see your own blind spots. All right, that's what a blind spot means. A spot that you cannot see. If that's a psychological blind spot, what you need a group of people that you actually respect enough to listen to them, to mirror and reflect things back to you about yourself. That's why most of our experiences are done in some capacity of community or group container, because that is where you get the reflections that highlight the work you need to do, right? The check, and then you actually use the structure of the experience to mold yourself, to go through the difficult process, right? There's a big difference between saying, I want to be more disciplined or I want to cultivate my integrity, and going through the obstacles and the psychological mud to actually kind of sweat that out of you, sweat the impurities that are preventing you from already being in total integrity out of you. That is a
Yeah.
really difficult process, right? We've heard so many things from people across these experiences. I've heard straight up like, yeah, I can't do this just because I hate myself, or because I have a habit of self-sabotage, or because I think I'm not good enough to do this, or because I lack the confidence that I can follow through in it. Like, there are like very core beliefs that give rise to this stuff. And you need a long-term supportive structure to go through that. And that
Yeah.
is what we have been
Yeah.
making for years in various capacities, right? The ongoing
Yeah.
dojo, a really long-term, regular community container. We've got the 100-day initiations, right? Like real, like intense periods of physical and psychological change. And we've got the foundations, right? Radical redesign, actually coming up with the direction and the vision that excites you. But all of those are psychological scaffolding, right? They're all checks and balances to keep you
Right.
on the path.
Yeah, I like that. It's I wanted to bring this around to the checks and balances we offer too, so I'm glad you caught that. It almost sounds like kind of three checks and balances we offer, and it's not, it is unique to Phoenix culture. It's also just a way of doing things that exists in the world. Is they're kind of three checks. One is accountability within a group, and this is probably a topic for another day, but there is something to feeling healthy guilt or shame at not doing something, and pride and encouragement when you do something. You can only get that if you're with other people doing the same thing who care. And so there's a huge and highly underestimated benefit of group accountability, of accounting for yourself and letting others account for themselves together. The second one that you mentioned is the mirroring, right? Mirroring back to someone else what's going on, the blind spots, what they're not seeing, or even you may not even know it's their blind spot, right? That's the beauty of mirroring, is all you do is mirror back what they're saying, and then they hear it. Suddenly it takes on a whole different meaning. And then the third one is that scaffolding, right? Here's the structure, go do it, personalize it, make it yours, flourish with this scaffolding that we're creating. It is so easy to discard those as simple and basic and think that you are an exception, for lack of a better word. Like, you don't need those because you're so smart and your mind understands everything that you need to do. That's just a bullshit story that so many people have, myself included. I mean, I've been reanalyzing kind of my own professional life, and like, I ran a business for 7 years without knowing what the fuck I was doing because I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't think I needed to. I thought I could just think my way through it. And that's what we do with so many obstacles. I can just think my way through it and I understand what I need to do, right? I need discipline, I need commitment, I need to do this, and then I can do it. So I don't need these like basic things to help me. Like, just because you can think it, like, does not mean you can do it. And like, it's just shooting yourself in the foot. Why are you going to go it alone because you understand everything? Like, you need real, tangible support if you want to become great, and if you want to live your values, and if you want to build this more beautiful world. Like, you have to accept that the basics are not basic. Like you said, I mean, this goes for what we talked about earlier with like natural living, like living with circadian and Freudian cycles. Like, that is not too basic. That can literally heal your health more than, getting 7 prescriptions will, right? Or like some fancy technique for mobility. Like, bullshit. Just do the basics, because the basics are 95% of what you need. And fooling yourself, you can think your way through or find a more complex, evolved, whatever technique. Like, it's just not true. It's just not true. And so I wanted to say that because it's so easy to listen to us or to anyone say these things and be like, yeah, okay, whatever, and just discard it as basic. It's not. it's the most valuable structure to, yeah, to combining these ideas of regeneration in service of greatness, in service of goodness.
Yeah, we were just talking about this the other day because this is something that's been on my mind a lot. Shame and honor are two sides of the same coin.
All right, we're back after a quick powder outage. So we left off on the idea of shame and honor. We were talking about checks and balances and some of the things we offer in like our cohorts, some of the things that are really important. And I think you had a few comments on this idea of shame versus honor and the value of that, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is part of the wisdom in the 100 days. The fact that it's extremely simple and the fact that it's easily falsifiable. You either did the thing today within the confines of the 24 hours or you didn't. Shame and honor are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. In order to have the potential to do something that is seen as honorable, you have to have the potential to do something that is seen as shameful. And so, sure, there are a lot of people who grow up, and whether through maybe their religion they were born into or being bullied at school or just not, being influenced by negative media advertising, they're like, no shame. I'm going to live without shame, right? And they drop that completely. And of course, you drop the potential for honor with that too. If you're not doing anything that could be shameful, you're not doing anything that could be honorable. And the way I've seen this in people is, we have the daily trackers in the 100 days that people can see, that your guides can see. And we have the weekly accountability check-ins, right? When we do a live cohort, and people have to account for themselves. They have to say, no, I totally messed up. And you know what? I don't care how evolved you are. Like when you admit that, like, yeah, I really dropped the ball this week, there's a tinge of shame. And people will come 2-3 weeks in a row and be like, dude, yeah, I feel really bad. I couldn't do it this week. But that makes it all the more beautiful when they come 2 months down the line and they're like, I nailed it. I feel so good. I worked myself through that valley, the challenging period I was going through. And you can actually see the like honor, the self-respect, the excitement. And you watch the group like mirror that back, like, yo, wow, you really did that, well done. And that actually means something because they had gone through the periods of like, yo, you're not upholding your commitment to the group. Like, what are you doing? And like, it actually makes the transformation that much more powerful. Your point as well on the kind of false belief that you can just tweak your way to this yourself. I actually completely agree with it. And I would just say, like, to me, that's just a hallmark of people not being serious, right? Like, extremely high level athletes have coaches and mentors and teammates that they get feedback from. Like, anyone who is serious about the work that they're doing needs checks and accountability and influence from the outside. And so, certainly you've heard me say this a lot about this stuff, is like, I certainly want the experiences that Phoenix Culture puts out to move more in the direction of like serious personal work, serious spiritual discipline. And so yeah, if someone wants to tinker with figuring it out themselves, like, be my guest. The only thing I would say is, like, when you're ready to take things seriously, come and join us, right? That's what this has been built for.
Yeah, 100%. And for me personally, it's a hard lesson. I feel like I'm learning in hindsight now. If I had realized this 10 years ago, God, like, let me be the lesson to you of like, don't make my mistake. Like, we are telling you because we know. Get in a group, get a mentor, get a coach, get yourself a framework. Like, because sure, like you just said, you can tinker alone, figure it out too. But like, why would you? Why would you? Why would you make it harder on yourself when literally the easiest, simplest, most natural way is to get in a group to get with someone who knows more than you, or even who doesn't, but just who can mirror back to you. Like, it's just, it feels kind of silly to go it on your own when you could just make it so much easier for yourself by getting help. Like, there's no, I don't know. I was thinking about this actually this morning. Like, the words that came to my mind were the difference between like a learning mentality, or you could say growth mindset, versus like performance or fixed. And I feel like throughout my entire youth, my entire university career, like I was in performance mode, not learning mode. And what I mean by that is it's like I have to go do it by myself in a quarter and present this paper and throw it in, and just whatever happens, happens, and hope that it's good enough. Like, that's performing versus learning mode or mindset, which is I'm going to turn this in, I'm going to see it, I'm going to get some useful feedback, I'm going to ask for feedback so I can incorporate it. I'm going to actually, like, you know, take what I can from my professors or mentors or whoever and put it back in my work, if that makes sense. It's a very different mindset of like, oh, this is helpful, I'm going to take what they have to say, versus like, I just need to perform and cross my fingers that it was good enough. And if it wasn't, I failed. Like, that's how I think I live most of my life, in that mindset, instead of being truly open to like learning from someone who knows more than me, or even from peers, right? You can learn from everybody. And that really hit me like this morning, literally. I think like in the shower, I was thinking about that, and I was like, ah, yeah, that's like performance, a feeling of performance, doing it on my own and just presenting it to the world, versus like interaction and learning and actually gaining from people who can see, as you said, your blind spots where you can't. Again, now in hindsight, it's like, what were you doing, little Chloe? Like, come on, that would have been so much better. Could have learned so much faster. But, you know, then you figure it out later. There's one other quick thing I wanted to highlight in the kind of accountability shame bucket, which is, so there's a couple of things that can happen when you're doing something difficult, right? You've committed to something. We're using the example of our 100-day programs. And you either feel, as you said, there are a couple of things that can happen, right? You either feel, I can't do it, I'm not good enough, and you go into like a shame spiral, right? Which is not healthy shame, because that's detrimental. You want to feel shame and then go, I don't want to feel this way anymore, I'm going to do better, right? So you can go into a shame spiral, which you have to avoid. And again, the group will help you with that because they support you and remind you that you can do it. The opposite that I see happen is, so one is almost like the growth at all costs bucket, and that's the shame spiral, because it's either growth or shame, and there's no other way around it, right? There's no regeneration, there's no evolution. The other trap is the almost too cyclical trap of like, oh, well, I missed all of my practices this week, but I'm just being gentle with myself. I'm just listening to my body, and yeah, it just didn't feel true for me, so I didn't do, like, bullshit. And it's really hard to speak to both of these, because you have to balance the tough love with the compassionate love, right? And this is why you need the framework, and you need the intuitive growth and the regeneration, because yes, there are legitimately times when, and especially for women, because we go through a whole monthly cycle, when you really have to be more gentle with yourself, and that's great. But are you going to do that at the loss of your own integrity with yourself and your own commitment to yourself? Because that's where I start to have a problem, and I start to say, okay, are you really being gentle with yourself, or is this just some really hardcore bypassing, right? Where now you're actually just forsaking your commitment and calling it gentle, or calling it going with the flow. And it's hard to speak to these because there is no perfect rule for how to live them both. The principle is, both principles of cyclical living, harmony, regeneration, intuition, and discipline and commitment, like, they have to meet each other. They have to. And once we choose an all or nothing, like, you know, we've stepped out of the true game of relating both. So yeah, those are the two kind of polar opposite traps that we have seen so many people fall into. And they'll talk about it in the calls. It's like, yes, that's great. Now get very honest with yourself. Is being gentle with yourself serving you? Is being in a shame spiral serving you? No. Okay. Listen to it, accept it, move on, get back to your commitment.
One of the really subtle realities of how culture has degraded people is only really possible in the modern kind of last century of humanity to be a kind of person who says, I didn't feel like it today. If you have to plant food in April in order to eat over the winter, there is no such thing as, yeah, not feeling it, man. Maybe you get a, but like sometimes things need to happen. And it's only because, you can sit on your couch during COVID and get a government handout because you don't feel like working, and then pay some minority who immigrated to your country to deliver food to your doorstep so that you don't have to make any kind of food. Like, it's only in the modern age that the the entire way of being of like, I don't quite feel like it right now is even possible. So I mean, you can take that both sides. You can take, wow, we've developed so much, truly incredible that we've been able to create so much abundance in systems that is possible. And on the other hand, it's the kind of people that come out of that system too. So there's a real trade-off
Right.
there.
As
The other
as
thing that you
always,
brought
right?
up,
There's always a hey, look how far we've come. And also this is the new trap. This is the new pitfall that has been created with this growth that you have to watch out for even more vigilantly. One more interjection is this is why I think again, it sounds maybe not radical. It sounds so like out there, but it's the most simple truth, which is we really have to reconnect with our intuition to tell the difference when it's like, no, I legitimately cannot do it today. This is not it. I legitimately am burned out. I'm pushed, like this is detrimental to my health versus no, I'm just being a weenie. I need to do my commitment. Like there's no perfect barometer that we can point to and be like, this is how you know whether it's what valid or not. You have to fine tune your own inner intuition to be really real with yourself and to be able to say, like, my commitment is more important to me than being a weenie, or my commitment is important to me and I just got my period. So actually, I'm going to take a nap because my body legitimately needs it right now, for example. Um, but yes, to your point, that pitfall has grown so much because there's no shame in it. There's no shame in just like, you know, being comfortable, indulging in convenience, not working too hard, feeling entitled, feeling privileged, feeling like you deserve to have everything easy. It's like that is cool that we live in a place where I can just have food magically appear at my house in 15 minutes. It's fucking awesome. It also has a huge pitfall that I never had before of like, great, is that all I'm going to do now? Is this helping me? Is this actually good for me? Like with evolution comes greatness and greater pitfalls, and that is where we are. We're in uncharted territory of greatness and evolution and AI and all of these things we've invented, and we have so many greater pitfalls to watch out for. So just wanted to add that.
yeah, there's a second part of this too that's really important to me. Is like in the few years we've been running it, I've always used the word helping people develop sovereignty, which is like for me like the opinion to stand on your own. I'd almost refine that and say one of the things I really want to build in people is agency. Subtle but important difference there. And I saw a question that really framed this for me the best. If you want to understand what high agency is, it's like if you were suddenly thrown into like a third world prison, who would you want to be thrown in there with? Right? Because like a high agency person, you have some level of confidence that something would happen that you could actually get yourself out. Right? Agency can take a whole lot of forms, right? It can take connections and relationships. It can be financial wealth. It can be just an optimistic mood. It can be creative thinking and problem solving. There are a whole lot of ways you can develop agency in yourself. But I think the most powerful statement of agency is, I will either find a way or I will make one. Period. There are people who, if you are truly committed to something, if someone is truly committed to something, there is nothing real that can get in their way. They will just find a way around it. There's no meaningful obstacle that they just don't go like, oh, great, okay, next. There's another group of people who will use any possible obstacle as an excuse not to do the thing. The war across the world is harshing my vibe, dude. I can't do this today. Oh, that you showed up 5 minutes late for the call and now my mood's off and I can't do it today. I don't feel like they will find any possible excuse just to give up on the thing, versus a person, there is no thing that you can put in their way that they will not overcome because they're pursuing the thing. And one of the things that I think is really toxic is being told or believing that that is just some gift of God that God puts in certain people and not you. You can absolutely cultivate your agency. You can cultivate the personality. You can cultivate that into your personality. I will either find a way or I will make one. Right? And sure, that can include periods of rest, right? I'm not talking running yourself into the ground, but that spirit is really powerful for whatever you want to do. I will either find a way to be the most compassionate person possible or I will make one, right? It can be for love and care and positive things. It can also be for getting shit done. And that is one of the things that people wrestle with the most in a lot of our experiences. And I think for good reason. It is a very difficult psychological process that you need to go through to really overcome that way of thinking, of just I will find the solution. What is the fix? I can do this. How do I make myself able to do this? You can build that in yourself. And that, I think, is so, it's lost. A lot of people don't have that. But it's also not some magical trick. You can actually just train that like you would build muscle. It is you can build the muscle of agency in yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're covering a lot of ground today. Oh my goodness. How did we even get on agency? But it's true. And a lot of the things you describe, I associate the word sovereignty with, that. They're related. Sovereignty, independence, agency, they're all related. And yeah, of course, they can be cultivated. A big part of it too. Two things. One is, in the examples you describe, what you're basically doing, to come from another angle, is you have to detach from the outcome, from the external stuff. That is a huge part of becoming sovereign, of becoming an agent into yourself, is, again, to reframe what you said. No matter what is happening around me, I'm not going to let that harsh my vibe, because I decide what my vibe is. Only I decide. I can decide. And so that's related to that, again, kind of yogic philosophy as well, of detaching yourself. I don't care whatever happens, whatever the consequences and whatever the current factors are, they don't affect me, because I choose my vibe. I choose how I feel. I choose what I'm going to do, regardless of the external situation. So there is actually a very, I don't know, holistic approach that I believe is part of agency as well. I'm reading, blasting through The Power of Now right now, right? I've also been deep into a lot of the Yoga Sutras, yogic philosophy and stuff this year, as you know. And so when we talk about these things, I have this whole new framework of oh, right, it's the same thing. If you want to have agency, you have to be here and now with yourself. You have to listen to yourself. You have to detach from the other stuff. And so that second part, that listening to yourself, is the cultivating of your intuition, which I'm kind of starting to believe no one can teach you how to do, because there's no guidebook. Like, it's just listen to yourself over and over and over. That's the only guide you can have. But stop listening to the external stuff. Stop letting it harsh your vibe. Stop letting yourself react to it, and develop that deep listening to your intuition, to where your commitments are more heartfelt because you followed your intuition and it's something you truly want to do, first and foremost. Because it's come from your intuition, you're more committed to that thing. And you're going to be able to listen to yourself more carefully when it's like go time and when it's pull back time. Because it's all coming from that same place, from your own agency, from your own decision that is born of your own intuition. No one can take that away from you. Nothing's gonna come against it. Like you said, you're not gonna make excuses if it's something that you truly want to do, that is truly from your inside, that you truly believe in and value. If that's the case, nothing's gonna change that. And if things are changing that, you're still just attached to external stuff. A recent example of what I'm saying, because I do like to ground it into examples, is, if you don't mind, I'm going to use your example of writing, right? Eric Brown loves writing. It is so important to him. It is what he values deeply. It is what he gets a lot of meaning. You gets a lot of meaning out of. It's like the top, you often say this, right? If I could be doing anything, if I could be working from anything I love, it would be writing. And yet, we just talked about this, yesterday? It is the first thing that often gets dropped because other commitments come up. And so what is that saying, right? I believe it is truly important to you. Like, that intuition, that trueness of writing is there, that love for it. The only issue is the attachment to other external factors, right? Or letting yourself go to other commitments and allowing those to come in and block your own agency and your own, truth, if you will. Which is great, because now that you see that, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what I need to do. This is my true commitment. This is truly important to me. Now I get to just wield my agency stronger to put it in its proper place. I hope you don't mind me using your example. It was just very recent. And as all things, it also comes in waves, right? Where, if I want to use a regenerative frame, like, there are times when you go in a wave of lots and lots of writing, and then it kind of dies down, and then you get back to it again. There's an aspect of that makes sense too. The hope is that that cycle is reinforcing the place it takes in your life, like the priority it takes, right? Like, great, you're going to go through some cycles until you finally really get it right and nail it. That's fine. And you're really nailing it right now. Anything to add on that? Cool. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground today. My goodness. I think we went into this with the idea of kind of talking about Phoenix culture itself, right? Some of the values, the vision of it, and we kind of just went on a whole little adventure through agency, checks and balances, growth, like the whole gambit. One sentence and one phrase. What is the one thing people to know Phoenix culture?
There are people who want the same things you do, who think the same way you think, and they're hanging out here doing the work. You are welcome.
Best ways to get involved is to just get on the email list, get on Instagram, so we can actually be connected on a regular basis. Best way to start, if this all feels like no, is Radical Redesign. It's 10 days. It is the foundation to doing anything that we just talked about, because you know what you're trying to do in the first place. So I'm going to start doing. Radical Redesign is the perfect thing. It's our gift to the world. It is free. Incredibly potent. Like, people who did it live with us a couple months ago, no way. Said how much could actually shift in just 10 days. And that's not even the real work. That's just the foundation. work is in our 100 days programs, soon to come year-long cohort that is in the works for the next few years. Long-term together around everything we just talked about, right? A long-term group to work with, to hold you accountable, to feel belonging with, to build this sense of both individual level work and movement level work. That happens, as we said, the framework that's provided, it just something we didn't really talk about today, but that's another kind of core principle of Phoenix culture is long term, doing the work long term, because there is no shortcut, there is no fast life in 10 days or 30 days. Like, it takes vision, going through the cycles times. And so this is most excited about to work on right now, is coming up with a really long term, intensive but accessible cohort for us all to work with, to go through ideally 3 like Phoenix cycles together through 300 days programs, and adding in a lot of extra fun offerings along the way. All that to say, a lot of amazing things, a lot of amazing people to work with us. Great, help us build if this speaks to you. With that, usually end our calls, Eric.
Thank you. I love you. See you soon.
See you very soon.